There we go. Again, we still have some people coming in, but just a quick overview of what we're going to be doing today. We have Juan Navarro from the Eastside Art House, and we have Philip Falcone from the mayor's office, and they will be discussing their work. They work very extensively in the arts with artists as artists. So they're going to give us some information on the best practices from both sides of the coin. And we will also have a Q&A at the end. So you can also put your questions in the chat, and I will be watching the chat. And if it's an important question, then I will bring it up to Juan or Philip while we're talking. So if you guys would like to start, you can introduce yourselves.
Go ahead, Juan.
So let me unmute myself. There you go. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Juan Navarro. I am the artist in residence for the Riverside Art Museum. I'm also an independent artist as well, doing work. I've worked with Philip in the past too, with Beautify Riverside, and continuing to do work engaging community and also large-scale mural projects.
Hi, everyone. I'm Philip Falcone. I am the senior advisor to Mayor Patricia Locke Dawson for the city of Riverside. I oversee all of her special projects, anything related to public affairs. One of those special projects, and one of the ways that I really got to work so closely with Juan, and even how I've really come to know Rachel as well in the Arts Council, is through an initiative called Beautify Riverside that was launched out of the mayor's office in July of 2022, which focuses on many things, but one of the large aspects is installation of public art, particularly when it comes to mural installation. So that's been my most recent venture and experience working with artists from the government perspective, and then, like I said, working really closely with Juan. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to start by just kind of each of us will share probably about 10 minutes, Juan about 10 minutes, myself about 10 minutes of kind of our perspectives of the art, the approach to art. In the instance of Juan, of course, how he operates as an artist and has done so much with government, businesses, organizations. And then I'll come in and talk to, from a government perspective or from a larger organizational perspective, how we work with artists, some best practices, and kind of things along that, kind of the more logistical side of things. So I don't know, Juan, if you want to start with the fun, creative side, and then I'll come in with the logistical side.
Okay, cool. So how many of you guys are artists in the room? I think there's a way to put like an emoji on the top corner, or a hand raise, or clapping hands, whichever one you want. Just so I know how many artists are in here. Okay, I see a round of applause from Rosie Cortez. She's here. I know Nancy's in here as well. So thank you everyone for being here. And I just want to give you the best way for me to share about like my journey. I just want to give you a quick summary of how I started and my perspective as I grew as an artist into growing into like working with organizations. So when I first started as an artist, it was through a virtual space similar to this. So I would be doing live streaming, and I would have an audience come in, and I would draw and doodle and then just engage with community on an online application and just like doodle their names. And it was really fun. And then that opportunity rolled over to then becoming, a painter, and then from a painter into a muralist. And then even my audience gave me an opportunity to like travel to do murals at their spaces, whether it was their businesses or their homes. And it was so awesome because in that bubble, I felt like, man, I'm living a life as an artist, but no one in Riverside knew. Like I was living out of my garage, and it felt a little strange for me to like walk outside and no one knew. But on the virtual space, I was getting commissioned, and I was doing things like that. So I started, I think during that time was between 19 to 21. But I always wanted to make a bigger, better project and connect with people through my work. So then there was one circumstance, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my failure, was when I said, you know what would be cool? Because during that period, I was just like making art, and then I would, make some money, and then I would just donate it back, like a Mr. Beast kind of style early on, before even Mr. Beast existed. I would just throw it back into the community and just like fundraise for different things and just kind of donate it away to different nonprofits and organizations that were also in that platform. So I didn't really keep much because I didn't really have enough I didn't really have a lot of maintenance. I didn't have a car yet. I was still living at my parents' house, so money wasn't really a thing. I just wanted to enjoy being an artist and just living a healthy life, and that was my pursuit. And one of my bigger projects on this online streaming app was maybe I should go and travel across Mexico and then give free murals away to all these orphanages across Mexico. And it's going to be love monsters because that's what I was pushing during that time. It was my illustration graffiti style. And I was writing to all these organizations, hey, I'm an artist and I want to just donate a mural. And all these organizations, they didn't reply so nicely. It was more of like, no, we don't want to. He's like, do you know who we are? It's like, I'm like, what? And I'm like, well, do you know who I'm just an artist, you know? And then they're like, so basically I was rejected multiple times. And sometimes even that approach of just like cold calling or reaching out to organizations to work with them, most of the time you're going to receive a no. So how did I go from an artist being rejected in terms of like installing even up to free work? Like how would they reject this? This is for the kids. I thought it was like a positive thing. But it was just that really social media didn't really translate very well when it came to the real world. That was one realization. And secondly was I needed a community to be based out of as well. So that's why I just said, you know what? Let me put this social media thing aside. Let me focus on real person interactions and let me get out there. So I started to build relationships with nonprofits here locally that were already doing murals within the Eastside community through Heal Zone, Riverside Community Health Foundation. And they were already started a program before I even arrived. And this was with Ronald El Cid. He was teaching kids from the Youth Opportunity Center to create murals in these alleyways. And I just volunteered. I said, hey, let me come in as a volunteer. And I did hours there volunteering, and they're like, Juan, we'd love to commission you to teach the next class. Okay. So then I was able to teach that next class. The mural offering during that time was $300 per garage door. And in my mind, I'm like, there's no way I'm going to make it. By then I was becoming an adult already. I finally acquired a car. So there's like life expenses started coming. So I'm pretty sure those are in the chat right now are probably full grown adults and, you know, also have to make an income as well. So I think that was the very early stages of like even public art during this era of using art to transform spaces. And they all started in the alleyways of the East Side. And I just took these smaller jobs for a long time. So it was almost about a year. But throughout that year, I did my very best like attempt to just grow as an individual too. So what were these growth components that I think pushed me to the next level was one, asking the organization what they're about. So that when you hear a word initiative, I didn't even know what that meant. Like, I didn't even know how our government worked. I didn't even know how state funding even works. So there's a lot of education that comes from the peripheral side of things. How does our city work? How does the world work? So all these questions, I wasn't there no longer to impress anymore. It wasn't a social media campaign of my artwork. Instead, it was, how do I get to know these organizations and why are they doing the work and do our morals align? And for me, public health, once I found out that that was preventative healthcare, it prevented people from going to the hospital. And there's so many, they have so many different ways of doing so. Miles for Smiles. They also take care of Pink on Parade, all these different campaigns. And I said, all right, then how, and they're already thinking of creative ways to include artists and some of their work, which was Heal Zone, which is part of that funding went into educating community leaders to also advocate for their neighborhoods and to beautify their neighborhoods and increase quality of life. So all these words that were given to me, like just understanding their processes, as an artist, I had to walk the steps as a community leader as well. So as an artist, we want to be like a well, which we're gonna open our mouth as wide as possible. We're going to consume everything we can, and then we're just going to keep what we need and spit the rest out. So that's how wells eat. They eat very specific things, very small things. But a well can just all absorbing and then just keep the things that we need to grow on to the next level. So from there, basically, I maxed out our CHF. They said, hey, Juan, we can't pay you anymore. We're getting close to paying you more than our own staff. So that's a little bit of a threat to our staff environment. So then we need to find an organization to pay you as an artist because you're an artist. I'm like, wow, like I'm an artist now. It was very hard for me to identify as an artist when I wasn't making much for being an artist. So I didn't really consider myself a professional artist yet. It wasn't until I had my opportunity to be part of the artist in residence of the Riverside Art Museum and then carry on my work to a new level. So obviously, not only did I didn't stay working at the same rate forever, but I also pushed that, hey, do you guys still like working with me? They're like, yeah, of course we love working with you. I'm like, did you guys like the work I produced? Yes. And then so basically I told them, well, in order for this to be sustainable, like the minimum I need to make is this much per month. And that's the only way I can stick around and continue to contribute to this big partnership that we had. And basically during that time, I was sitting on shoulders of giants. So as an emerging artist or even as a professional artist, and you want to start working with organizations, I think obviously when you do receive an opportunity, whether it's working for free or whether it's working for a very low amount, perform as if you were being paid the full amount. That way, when the time comes for you to negotiate, they're like, well, you've proven that you can actually complete and accomplish everything you've promised. So you name your price so we can keep you. And I think that's what happened. And as I grew, that was the opportunity that I received to then elevate myself into working with other organizations. So then I was recommended to Riverside Art Museum, and Riverside Art Museum now helps fund a lot of my projects through this residency. And these residencies are funded by the National Endowment of the Arts, which is a national fund for the arts, or sometimes they're funded by CAC, the California Arts Council. Some of them are funded by private donors. So like if the Riverside Art Museum has a partnership with US Bank or other Altura or whatever private institutions, since they're a nonprofit, they're allowed to take donations. And then obviously the museum keeps a cut, and then also the rest goes to the artists. So there's very complex models of how an organization can find funding to work with artists, but I also think artists have to be aware that we also must share the earnings that we win as well. So why do I get chosen? Not only do I perform what I promised, I also learn about the institution and their practices. I also align myself with their visions and their initiatives, or basically what are your themes and what are your goals as an institution, but then what are my themes and my goals as an artist? And if you can find that nice middle ground and you believe in the concept together, that's what makes a great symbiotic, mutually beneficial relationship. And at the end of the day, like I'm a big advocate for artists themselves. So I always let people know, hey, artists can be a professional. If we see our work as a service, then we have less tendency to really like mess things up just out of like emotion or something. Just know that when organizations hire us, they look at us as a private contractor. So they've hired wall painters, they hire plumbers, they hire electricians, and they hire an artist. Even though we're very unique and experts in our field, just know that when they're doing the contracts, sometimes they're very similar to how they treat other contractors. But I think once an organization begins to understand like, wow, like, artists are something special, they're very impactful. They can be leveraged to produce work that then also brings more awards to our city and brings more grants into our city. Then I feel like there is value there once you become like, once you've done those things to uplift your entire neighborhood through bringing in funding that will benefit not just the artists themselves, but the infrastructure of Riverside or your city in general. So these stories can last a very long time, even beyond your work, and can be used to leverage more work for other artists or more work for yourself. So that's a little glimpse of my story. I think I might have passed 10 minutes now, but I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Philip. I hope you guys, and then again, we'll have Q&A at the end. So if there's anything that I missed or any detail you'd like to explore, I'll be open to questions.
Cool, thanks, Juan. So I wanted to kind of start my portion by kind of acknowledging a few things. So I come at things through a different lens. And I think I was kind of looking through the participant list and recognize a few names. My hunch is we probably have majority artists, but I'm hoping that we have some government folks out there and some businesses and organizations that are maybe not artists themselves, but are looking to employ artists to create public art in partnership with artists and bring public art into their businesses or organizations or various government entities that they represent, because I come at things through that lens. So my background is in art history and architecture, but I work in politics, and particularly in politics for an elected official. So I'm going to kind of come at this from how does the city of Riverside or more macro kind of local governments operate in the public art space, as well as with artists. But all of this really should be couched in the idea that I come at things from a working for an elected official standpoint. Like I said, work for the mayor. So it's a little bit different from if you're, for example, working in a city's community and economic development department or public works department. It's a little bit different, but I think there's enough crossover where it'll still kind of make some sense here. As I mentioned, Beautify Riverside largely is what has made me work so closely with so many artists, in particular in the last year. So we've done about a dozen murals, public art murals, since July of 2022. So even less than a year, was about 10 months or so. It's been a lot of we learn as we go. The city of Riverside is known as the city of arts and innovation. And so we've, for a while now, I would say probably for the better part of the last decade or so, have really put a focus on public art and has really focused on making spaces beautiful through art. Not a lot of cities, I think a lot of cities are starting to get to that point now, but I'm going to put a positive plug in for the city of Riverside. I think in many ways we were somewhat ahead of our time in that. For the size of city that we are, we're a medium-sized city. If you look at cities like San Francisco, Sacramento, Los Angeles, they've been at this art game for a long time. San Diego being one, and Sacramento in particular when it comes to murals. They've been at this game for a long time. But majority of cities are not these large cities. The majority of cities are medium-sized cities and small cities. And so I think that now you're starting to have cities in that medium and smaller range start to kind of come around to public art. I'm seeing different programs popping up in Moreno Valley, Rancho Cucamonga, and other places that are maybe were existing before, but I wasn't as familiar with them. I'm really starting to see them now. So I think that's a great thing. We're starting to see kind of just whether it be organic or you have a leader or community folks like Juan getting involved and kind of demanding that. And that's not a negative connotation. That's a good thing. That demanding is, I think, an important and powerful thing. But the way we approach a public art project, I'm going to kind of just go through step by step how we do it in our office, because I think, like I said, it's largely could be similar across government entities, across cities. So, we have a property, for example, that maybe gets hit with a lot of graffiti. And instead of sending constantly city workers to go out and remove the graffiti, one of the things that we realized as a city was that public art, murals in particular, deter graffiti. Now we have to look at what is graffiti. Graffiti really, from our perspective, at least from a city's perspective, is painting, creating on a wall without permission. Permission is the important word there. And so without permission of a property owner, it's considered graffiti from the government definition. And so when we see that there's areas of issue, we talk to property owners, we solicit artists, and we look to see how we can make things happen. Now, that's easy on paper, but it's much more difficult in the kind of nitty gritty day to day. The way we operate through Beautify Riverside is we have a city call system for the city of Riverside called 311. People can report graffiti, dumping, neglect, code violations, all these things that really make for not as desirable of a place from an aesthetic standpoint, but it's much more deep than that. It's really not, it's not shallow, it's not superficial. What we have come to realize is that when you have an area that is facing blight, that is facing undesirable activity, code violations, crime, whatever, fill in the blank, it is perpetuated. It perpetuates other undesirable activity. And so the way you kind of end that cycle is by investing in a neighborhood, is by making an area more attractive, more welcoming. And public art is one of the best ways to do that. So we look at where do we have across the city that has the most complaints or requests for service, whether it be dumping, code violations, graffiti, all that. And from there, we compiled a list. This was back in June of last year. We compiled a list of all these places that have the most issues. And from there, we started contacting property owners and saying, you know, we want to partner with you to bring public art there, to invest in your properties, to beautify the area. And the murals are what became most popular. And I was able to kind of start, you know, collecting really a network of different artists in town that each have their own different style. But knowing that different style, I'm able to see, okay, we have this particular property in this neighborhood. The property owner has a vision for this type of art. In our office, of course, we have our input, the mayor and our team, we have our vision for what we think should go there. How do we kind of come to a consensus here? And how do we find an artist in our network that we know kind of meets that niche? And so one of the tips I have is, as Rachel, Juan, and I were preparing for this is, and it's not always easy, is that kind of know your network of artists for businesses and organizations, or start making those networks and knowing kind of what their style is. Not every artist is perfect for every project, but knowing an artist that might fit a different project, I think, is really important and powerful. And it's better than just kind of casting this big wide net of not knowing what you're going to get or who would even be interested or what they would be able to deliver. I think it's a little bit better, at least from my perspective, to have a smaller group that might be interested in one particular project and kind of going from there, rather than 20 artists for one wall and you have to tell 19 of them that unfortunately they're not going to be able to get the project. So having that network of artists has been really important and helpful for us. And then and working with the property owners. When people talk about Beautify Riverside, they always say, and I wasn't watching my time, so Rachel, give me the hook when I hit my 10 minutes. I didn't look to see when I started. One of the things people always say is, you know, it must be so challenging managing all different artists who want to do different things, and the government and the business owners. And no offense to any business owners out there, the artists have always been the least of my worries or headaches. It's always been property owners it's been a real challenge to get folks to see I hate to say this, but the benefits of art. To many of us artistic folk or people who studied it in school, it's kind of, we see it as common sense, as a no-brainer, but we have to be aware that that's not the case for everybody. And so really helping educate people in a nice way, in a respectful way, but helping them to know the real benefits of art and kind of bringing them along with us. That has been, I think, the biggest challenge for us, and is the biggest challenge for government. People are skeptical of government. They see a letter coming from the mayor's office saying that we want to help make this mural on the wall and make it all pretty. And they think this is what's the catch? This is too good to be true. And so they become suspicious and sometimes have that guard up. And so it's our job to kind of chip that away. And the way I do that is I say, our projects are privately funded through donations. So we'll gladly accept donations. If you're the property owner and want to chip in money, we'll gladly accept it, but it's not a requirement. And we want to work with you on this. We're not going to do anything without your input and permission. But we also want the artists to be able to express themselves. We don't want to, you know, change a design or a rendering or critique an artist so much where they become lost in what ultimately becomes done. We want it to be still the artistic style of that particular artist. So we try to balance all of that, and it's definitely a fun challenge. One of the ways that we've been most successful is, in this particular program, we move fast. And that was the thing one of the tips I had, it was actually number one on my list that I had written down, is that, you know, government likes to, for good or for bad, and I'm not here to bash on government because that's where I get my paycheck, so I love it, but we have a tendency to love bureaucracy and love long, lengthy processes that I think are just not necessary. We don't need to overcomplicate things. And so I think that being able to move quickly is important. It's something that we really pride ourselves on in our office. When you're working in the elected official space, for a mayor, for a council member, for a county supervisor, it's a little bit easier to kind of move quickly. It's a little bit difficult when you're kind of more in the kind of organizational chart within the city and various other departments. But you know, the tip really being that it's not vital to have a million layers of bureaucracy to everything, you know, and I think that also that stifles creativity. So being able to, knowing that we need to have, you know, agreements and coordination between artists and property owners in the city, and all those agreements take time. and have to be reviewed. And if we need to get legal folks involved, that's all fine. That does take time, but it can't be so lengthy where we get lost in the shuffle of it all. So being able to move quickly. The way we do agreements and permits in our city is we have a public art application in the city of Riverside. And really what it is that we just ask artists, property owners, if you're doing any kind of public art, even if it is on private property, even if it's not on city property, we just kindly request that this simple form be filled out and a rendering be submitted so we're aware of what's going up. We're not going to say, if it's on private property, we can't necessarily say you can't do that because we don't like the color orange and you're doing a large mural with a lot of orange in it. It's not like that. It's just, it's for the sake of awareness and being notified. If we get a complaint from a resident saying, oh, this is graffiti, it shouldn't be up there, we say, actually, no, we have documentation agreements between the artist and the property owner. This was all done on the up and up and that it's legit. So that's something that we do. And then we keep all those things on file in our Arts and Cultural Affairs department here in the city of Riverside. So that's not really in my department, but it's still a city department nonetheless. And the last thing I'll kind of say before I think we kind of turn it more to questions or kind of back and forth is that, and this is just kind of one of the tips that I learned is that knowing local artists and being familiar with their work is so important, as I mentioned, because I know I don't particularly care for like competitions for artwork. You know, for if we have a wall, for example, at least at Beautify Riverside, we'll never do it as a competition. The reason we don't is because I don't like the idea of requiring an artist to do all this work up front, to invest all this creative time and energy into a rendering, into a project, when there could be 100 people apply for it and that work be for not really. And when you're first starting out, I get that for some artists that works, but we largely work with artists who maybe aren't interested in doing and being in a competition. I totally get that. So for government agencies, for businesses, there's a thing called, if you have to do it that way, called an RFP, request for proposals. And there's stipulations and guidelines and expectations folded into that RFP. That's different from just, here's a competition, send us your rendering and we might like it, we might not. And if we don't like it, sorry, thanks for trying. I think there needs to be, from a government perspective, more respect shown to artists for their time, their creativity. And I think one of the ways that we show them respect is that we do this in a serious way, where we have an agreement and a contract, all of that, and expectations. And if artists don't want to be part of the RFP, then that's fine. But I think it's a little bit more sophisticated than doing a competition, for example. Just a little side tidbit that hit me as I was thinking earlier. But I think now that's a little bit about kind of what how I see things from a government perspective. Rachel, I don't know if we want to turn over to some questions to be talking, just to help maybe conversation flow more, whatever you guys think.
Yeah, you guys can open it up for questions. I know there's some questions on filling out the application or questions specific to budgeting. Those questions can be directed to me, and we will have office hours on this coming Friday and the following 2 Fridays. And so I put a link for sign up for that in the chat. So this Zoom meeting specifically is about working with artists as an organization, or as, you know, some sort of business entity, or for artists to learn about how, like what the best practices are working with organizations. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to pop in and ask Philip or Juan.
And while we wait for the question, I do want to, Philip reminded me of something in terms of, so from an artist perspective, when it comes to creating a project, so when an organization does throw out a request for proposal and they're asking for a render or sketch, then and it's a legit application, then those are still going to happen. I think that's the only way larger organizations that may not be doing work locally to your, like say the contractors from Orange County or from Long Beach, but they're doing work in your city and they don't have enough time to like go in there and meet each artist. So sometimes there are spaces where the opportunities are like you need to submit to compete. For for me, I do focus on more local opportunities and seeing how to cultivate the art scene locally in my region. And very rarely am I like competing or applying. And sometimes when I do have the free time or that window opens, I do submit to those opportunities as well. And just know that what it comes down to is understanding what the organization needs and following those rules. And I think that will set you up in terms of like the best way to being able to communicate or submit something. But when an organization actually comes up to you as an artist and is actually already choosing you based on your previous work, the best way to go is by being able to also protect your creative work and your time. So one strategy that I have that I'm willing to share with the artists here is sometimes I do ask for a 10 to 30% cost of the entire project to create a render. What this does, it instead of the artists betting their time and week of work on for this potential opportunity, it allows the organization to bet their 10% of monies, so that way you can bet your time and energy to create the best project for them. And then if your project is good and it's something that you both align with, then the project will continue to its full finished project. But if it was something that, oh, we can't work with you, then the organization just loses 10 to 30% and just tells you no cordially as well. But obviously, as an artist, you respect if you are receiving a 10 to 30%, you do your best because you want to complete it all the way through. So that's just a little, that's if you have the experience and also the portfolio and you know that you can accomplish, then you can set those parameters as you grow as an artist too. But again, if you're just trying to get your foot in the door, there's going to be many times where you even start just by introducing yourself and doing a lot of the legwork. But I'm a big advocate for artists to charge for their work. And sometimes maybe as an artist that's in this room, maybe we're not even at the level of like, oh, I'm asking for a 10 or 30% deposit for an idea. And like maybe you guys are at a point of like, how do I charge my work? And I think the best way to find prices is by connecting with a local art community, talking to other artists as well. What are the prices and rates that you guys are giving? If you're able to, please send me a price potentially for this thing. But for me, the best way for me to price my earliest work is I literally went minimum wage. How many hours does this take me? All right. I did not want to get paid under minimum wage. And sometimes you'll be surprised that organizations are offering under minimum wage for you to complete your project. So just make sure that when you are, especially as a private contractor and you are bidding, make sure you don't go under a minimum wage. And sometimes like, you're like, hey, you're an artist, you're a specialist. You've put in a lot of years to become the artist you are today. Maybe you're not even like you're worth a little bit more than minimum wage and your earliest projects because of the time it took you to train yourself to become that artist as well. So that's just hopefully that inspires you in terms of pricing. If no one helps you and you're just going to use the standard of like, well, let's see me versus a fast food worker. All right, let's just try to price match there. And then I think at least every artist in the city is worth the same thing as a McDonald's employee starting staff. So just keeping that in mind. Hopefully that's helpful for you guys.
Well, and Juan, that actually jogged a memory of something that we've done. And from an artist perspective, Juan, feel free to push back if you think this is not the best option. Or something that I have done before is, well, of course, we always know kind of what we envision for a building, and and I largely talk about in terms of mural projects. So, for example, I always like the mural needs to complement the architecture of the building. So, for example, we've done a lot for those that are familiar with Riverside, the neighborhood called Magnolia Center, which is not too far from the Riverside. Well, it is the Riverside Plaza, that general area, and majority of the architecture in that area is mid-century. So we know we want the art, the public art, to complement this kind of mid-century type of artistic style, the color scheme, the shapes, the geometric style. And so knowing that when we're going into describing to an artist what we would like to see is important. And so what a lot of times what we've done is that, we know what artists we're going with. We know we like this artist's particular style. We know they have the ability to do the type of look that we're going for. And so we maybe won't pay them the the cost for a rendering, but we 100% know that we're going with them. And if you describe it well enough from the get-go, you may get a rendering that maybe just needs a few small minor modifications, and they already know they're getting the project. So I think that might be one option. That doesn't work in all cases, because that's once you already know you're for sure going with this one artist, and you're not going to have them go to do the work of putting a rendering together when you may and not pay them and may not end up using them. So at least I think from an artist perspective, and Juan can correct me if I'm wrong, like if you know you're getting that job, then at least you know that money is going to be coming in. If they have the money in the bank and you're going to be getting the job, you at least know that money will be coming in, whether they pay you that 10% upfront or not.
Okay, so we did have a question in the chat, and there were a couple things I also wanted to mention. But this question, you kind of answered it a little bit, but being more specific, as an organization planning to hire a full-time artist, how do you basically respect their perspective as well as their own? And I believe that goes a little bit along with what you were saying, and just, understanding the artist that you're working with and doing your homework.
So that's for me, right, Rachel? I'm gonna jump in.
Sure, why don't you?
Juan can add in later if he wants. Well, the tough answer of this is, for each organization, it's largely going to depend on the particular staff person or leader, for lack of a better word, that you're kind of working with. And so that could vary. In my particular instance, the way I respect the artist is that like I said, I know I'm familiar enough with their style that I know kind of what. I mean, not every artist. I was telling Juan, what I love about Juan is that he can do, and a lot of artists he can do absolutely anything. I mean, Juan can, or at least if there's something that Juan can't do, I've yet to see it. So, but he can do all different types of artistic styles. And so, while he maybe is not as easily to pin down to one particular style, I know Juan's capable of doing pretty much anything that I can, kind of dream up, so to speak. But for a lot of artists, I have multiple ones I work with that their style is their style. I 100% respect that, but I know that going into it. And that, I think, is how that respect is really built, because you know it going into it. So that awareness, but then when it comes to kind of the negotiations and the nitty gritty of designing it and getting it to a point where the city, the property owner, and the artist are all like, you know what, yeah, we can work with this. This looks good. Is just a lot of openness and compromise. And I largely say, and because I come from a political background, compromise is not always my favorite word, but I think in this particular case, it's important for the government entity or the organization, the business, and the property owner, and if those are the same people, then that's easier, to be more willing to compromise than the artist. And the reason I say that is because we have a lot of artists here. I think you probably understand what I'm saying. This is a child. This is your work. This is your baby here. And so I expect the government on our end and the property owner to be more willing to compromise than the artist when it comes to particular design aspects, even if that means the property owner and the organization is footing the bill, which I imagine they would be. There has to be an awareness there. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I think it largely differs based on who you're dealing with and who that person is at that organization, who that employee is that you're going to work with. Any input, Juan, on that one?
I'm gonna second what you said. I like that you're challenging organizations to be flexible, and I think
because we're never flexible. It drives me crazy.
Yeah, I think even early on in my work, just know as an artist, like there was some times where I submitted an idea that I thought was the best idea ever. Sometimes as artists, we always put our best creative work forward thinking like it's going to be accepted, but we do take it very personal when we get rejected. And there's been so many times in the meeting where my eyes get a little watery and my feelings get a little hurt when I turn in my work and it gets rejected. So I think a professional artist eventually understands that this is going to happen no matter how professional you ever become. The rejections at the door all the time. And just know, even to me today, like I still get rejected. Maybe there's some proposals that are like, let's still make some adjustments. So, but I think we're headed to a direction, especially in our city here in Riverside, where there's more creative freedom happening, but it had to take the early pioneers of mural making or art making to just work with the institutions that were choosing to work with artists in the first place, like took the risk on us. And there was, there's a lot of back and forth, and there's times where I've even rendered 5 times just to get one project approved. So it made the project last like a month to 2 months longer, and it made my check so small. But these are the trendsetters. These are, if you're like the first muralist in your city, or you're working on a project that no one's have done before, expect pushback, but then also respond, like take that pain or whatever it is, the sadness or the rejection, pour it back into your creative work and come back at a bigger and better design. And I think when you come back, you realize like, oh my gosh, I'm actually grateful for that feedback. I'm grateful for that rejection, because what I produce after in collaboration with this organization, it was a lot better than I even thought I could, so sometimes we get that feedback or that rejection, but we didn't know that taking that opinion and advice sometimes just produces a greater quality work that both people are happy with. So obviously don't just like sabotage it out of like resentment. But again, what it comes down to, it's like, if you want to be an artist that's easy to work with, be open-minded to being a little flexible, but at the same time, I understand that artists have independent journeys. They have legacies to build. Their styles and their brand has to carry over decades at a time. And each artist is allowed to have their own approach, but right now we're talking about collaborating with organizations and public entities, and sometimes it is going to take a little bit. So just knowing that already, and that's already common in the art world, like being rejected no matter what level you're going to be part of, you can be the cool organization and attract many artists and attract very talented people when your rapport around the city says, you know what, they're flexible with artists. You know what, they're taking risk and allowing their brand to accept what the artist is gifting us. Because if we start seeing artists as a gift, we start seeing what they produce as a gift to our city, as a gift to the community members that they're serving. Again, art as a service. And if you start seeing it as that way, you begin to also have a little bit of art appreciation, so like not everyone has taken art appreciation, but like there's a lot of power in just like also having the humility and also giving a little bit of leadership to the artist to execute the vision that they may have to. So it goes both ways. Obviously, if it's obviously really a bad idea, then stop it. But if there's a little bit that's like maybe not your taste, but we don't know the perspective of communities too around that. And usually the artists, since they're doing the legwork and they're connecting with the community and they're out in public, they usually have a really good like basically they're that all absorbing well. Remember, they have a really good perspective of what that area looks like or what it needs, and just trusting the process. Again, even when you start drawing a painting, it looks horrible at the beginning, but by the time it's done, it can be a very celebrated piece. And I just want to add one more point to that. One thing that helped lower the risk for an organization, because organizations want to work with artists that are low risk. If I'm gonna hire you, but then you painted something that was just so bizarre that it was just so hurtful, and then it just created like this havoc or very polarizing ideas. I mean, art is that, yes, I understand, but when it's public art and it's a gift for everyone, when you create a piece of art that's very specific to a specific group, then sometimes that can also lead to like a big conflict. That will happen here and there, but I also keeping in mind like potentially investing in like an iPad Pro, tools that you can render onto the building. That way it puts the organization more at peace when they see the design prior to being created. And again, as an organization, an artist is willing to do this once they know for sure they're the chosen artist too. So it's always going to be a balance. There's never right or wrong. Remember, it has to be mutually beneficial. So just really try to identify when an organization is giving you an opportunity to reciprocate that care as well as an artist, vice versa. When an artist is serving an organization, they don't have to work with you. They can be working on their own stuff, but they are going to take the time to work with you to do something like this. So let's reciprocate that kindness to the artist as well.
Okay, I have just a couple comments and then we'll move on to the next question. But just to reiterate the fact that it is kind of a balanced, equal, like it's a working relationship, and each artist is going to have their own expertise in whatever style that they're creating. So just because you hire an artist doesn't mean they're going to necessarily be able to, render what you're looking for. So again, just do your homework. And artists also should be doing their homework on, what they're getting involved in and what the organization is before they agree to working together. So then we have another question So how do you prevent selection of art for public space from becoming political or a tug of war in city government? And where I'm from, some elected officials will try to sabotage projects because the person's background or beliefs. Any comments on that?
That's a tough one. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, first of all, and I'm hoping it's not the city. Well, it shouldn't be the city of Riverside, because this doesn't happen under our mayor's watch. So what we typically do is we have kind of loose but framework guidelines in the city of Riverside for, of course, and all of our projects to beautify Riverside, because that is an official, city, not city sponsored, because it's not paid through city dollars, but city initiated project. None of that artwork is anything related to politics. Now, I separate politics and government. Politics being, it's not going to be, liberal, conservative, whatever. That's different from, government. You could have a mural of a city hall, for example, or whatever it may be. So we don't do anything political, largely not religion. There's various kind of little instances there. Juan and I had a discussion of some previously that we can maybe chat about later with the group if you all are interested in that. But typically not religion, typically not, of course, not drugs, alcohol related, kind of some of these things that are just a little too controversial and may not be the best thing to include to prevent, in an effort to prevent some of this unnecessary headache. So we have those guidelines in our city. What we do have, though, and this might be helpful for some of the cities, or the particular the example of a city where the elected officials maybe kind of put their thumb on the scale a little bit too much, where they're too involved. It's a unique situation here where we have the mayor's office being heavily involved in public art in Riverside, because prior to our mayor's administration, largely the elected officials stayed out of it altogether because of this particular instance. Folks would be a little concerned that an elected official would have kind of the final say, yes or no, on what goes in a mural, where it goes, why it's going, their own rationale for why it's going there. And while we do have a very strong input in what is in the mural, we also have, at least to Beautify Riverside, and what our mayor has, she has a committee of 12 people, one that represents every district in our city, every ward. We have 7 wards. So that's 7 folks right there. And an additional 5 that represent various kind of business entities, the Chamber of Commerce, the Downtown Association, things like that. So it's a committee of 12 that everything that we kind of discuss with artists, at least renderings, not necessarily kind of the nitty gritty of pricing and all of that stuff, but designs, things like that, we kind of pitch to this group of 12 for feedback. Now, we don't ask them to go, and say, well, there's this one little tree right here in this corner that I don't like, we shouldn't have that. They don't really go that into the specifics, but it's kind of more so we run it by this panel, so it's not just one person from a city perspective having kind of the final say yes or no over if it should be put up or not. So kind of having that community committee is important. And that's one of the ways that we avoid kind of this idea of government, of elected officials who can come and go based on how the voters see fit, prevent them from having too much of an undue influence. And then we just have guidelines that prevent the, politics, religion, alcohol, drug, kind of those type things that probably wouldn't be the best thing to include in a city mural. Now, if it's on private property, though, that's where it gets a little difficult. So I mentioned that we have the city's art application. The city doesn't really have the ability to say no to a mural that's going up on a building that's not owned by the city. This just happened. I was telling Juan and Rachel about an article in the LA Times that people were sending to me a couple of weeks ago. At this coffee shop, they do a rotating mural at this large wall inside their coffee shop once every February. So once a year, it's a new mural that goes up. And there's right now there's some imagery, some violent imagery that is really has some folks kind of feeling a certain type of way. It brings up tough feelings and discussions. And so a lot of folks want the city to step in and remove it. But the city doesn't, this is not in Riverside, this is Los Angeles County, but the city doesn't really have the ability to do that. And so that's kind of tough. And that's each city kind of can manage that in their own particular way. I think the way that we would address that, which luckily we haven't had to address that. So I hope it stays that way. But the way at least we would address that is we would have the mayor or some official from the city speak to the property owner and try to come to some kind of, and the artist, but the property owner is the one who kind of has the final say in this particular instance because it's their property. Try to talk to them to see what can be done to maybe address some of those feelings, because even though art is supposed to encourage discussion, if it's a real hurtful discussion that the majority of folks maybe aren't on board with, it's tough. I mean, it could become a slippery slope, but maybe it's not the best thing for that community. And so leaders need to discuss with property owners on that. And that's kind of, I think, more case by case basis.
Okay, and then another question, how do you work with a city government that doesn't have support of a beautification commission or similar entity? Can you work with the city staff directly?
Great question. So before we had Beautify Riverside, as I mentioned, has only been around since July of 2022. So prior to that, we have an Arts and Cultural Affairs division for the city of Riverside. I know not every city has that. But that division focuses largely on, arts and cultural affairs. So I guess the name kind of helps with that. But to break down even more than that, they do a lot with event permitting, festivals, things like that. So most cities have some kind of department like that. Who do you go to in a city when you want to have an art festival, for example? You need event permitting. So if maybe you don't have an arts and cultural affairs division or department, you may at least have like a special events division that manages different things. And sometimes public art will be kind of put under that umbrella. So you can go directly to them to work with them. If they don't have that, every city for sure has a community and economic development department. That's one of the core foundations of local government. And art is an economic driver. Art is a people and tourist attractor. And so that's some of the things that community and economic development departments focus on. So you could go and work directly with them. I would also, if there is one elected official or a city manager or someone that would be in favor of this, also utilize them as an ally to kind of help tie in, because these departments answer to the city manager, the city council, and the mayor. So that's important to have those allies as well. But if there's not a program, then definitely, working directly with city staff would probably be the only option in that case.
Juan, do you have any experience with approaching city officials aside from Philip? Not sure who approached who though, actually.
Yes. So say you want to work with the city, and maybe the city was like pre-Beautify Riverside and saying like even the leaders that you work with not responding to your emails, not really getting back to you. That's fine. You can find a nonprofit organization that is already doing great work in the community, and then they can represent you too. So I think if you're an organization and you're willing to risk it with an artist to innovate a process within your region, your city, then I think doing so and justifying it with other initiatives, such as like how Philip has said, like economic development, right? So as long as you have a good reason as part of city planning, every city planning is written every 10 years. So you can even research that book and just really list these topics that are the rule book for the city itself, and be informed. I think being informed and defending your practice through their language is going to be your best defense. So I know it sounds pretty crazy, but artists seem like they have to be lawyers to protect their artwork. And sometimes, yes, that's what happens in early stages of public arts. And take risk. I know that's probably not the best advice, and like, oh my gosh, like, what do you mean take risks? Like how far you take that, but meaning like take subtle risk, but be inclusive and really still try to do the outreach and do your best. They asked you, well, why did you do it without us? Oh, well, here are all these emails, here are these logs, here are these phone calls. I tried to reach out to you, but I guess it didn't work out. I ended up working with this organization, and encourage and inspire, cast a vision to these organizations that will be like, also that will work with you too, to also be able to create the language that it needs to protect your installments or your artwork. So that's my advice as an artist. If there's no one there, and then just say it comes down to just nobody, like not even an organization, and no one wants to protect you, then it's probably time to look inward and saying, all right, what about my practice is stopping anyone from partnering with me or anyone from vouching for me? Maybe it's not a them problem. Maybe it's just like, oh shoot, then maybe I just need to get better. And that was my responses early on, you know, like maybe why was I getting rejected by these orphanages? I'm doing it for free. Like, what's going on? And it's like, well, maybe I was offering very specific things that I only did no matter what, and I didn't budge. And then the moment I started becoming flexible and being more open-minded and learning, and you have to learn again and again and again, depending on every organization. And you're just an always learner. Learning never stops. Learning the context, learning the community, learning the organization, learning their initiatives or their plans, their goals, and then seeing if you even align with those things. And if you do, then that's your winning project. That's when you also then give your creativity as a gift, and work with them.
Philip, is there a document of the guidelines for the restricted topics for the Beautify Riverside project or murals that you guys have done?
For Beautify Riverside, we don't have any particular, we don't have a specific like written list of guidelines. We do have a larger kind of city. And like I said, they're somewhat loose. It says, you know, like imagery that, and I can get this to Rachel but I think it's also on the city's website. If you search City of Riverside, Arts and Cultural Affairs, Public Art Application. I think at the top of the application even says, and it's very broad, but it says something like, you know, political, religious, and it doesn't say drug related, but that's kind of what the sentiment of one of the lines. I forget the exact wording that they use. And it kind of says that those are, you know, in many cases not encouraged, or in most cases not, or all cases not encouraged, and in some cases not allowed. But there is language, but it's very brief. The way what we do through Beautify is that's kind of one of the initial, when I talk to artists. I mean, when I talk to Juan, for example, Juan knows that already, so I don't even. I've worked with Juan before, so I don't go through all that with him because he knows. But when you're starting with an artist that you haven't worked with for the first time before, or when you're working with for the first time, I kind of go over those things at the onset, just so they're aware. But the city's art application does have some language there on that.
And I believe I just shared that. I hope it's the right
awesome.
one.
Okay.
And then,
I think they might have updated it too, so I'll take a look and check to see. But yeah.
okay, and then also someone would like to hear the process for public art after the artist has been selected. So could you walk them through a brief overview of how you've now selected Juan to do this mural at Casablanca? Now what's going on?
Well, let's actually, we can let me think, because we're working on one in the Casablanca neighborhood, but it really hasn't officially started yet. But I guess we can kind of say kind of what we're looking at. So this one, in the instance of Casablanca, and this is done through Beautify Riverside. We have a sponsor that's sponsoring the mural in full. And so we talked to the sponsor. They were really, the way it happened is they had approached us and said that they were interested they wanted to sponsor a mural, they wanted to pay for it in full, and they wanted it to be in the Casablanca neighborhood. So they came to us with the money and with the neighborhood. And they said, do you have any locations in the neighborhood that you all have kind of identified? And I said, yes, we do. This is our main one. I sent them an image of this wall that we wanted on us. That's our number one. If you guys don't want that one, we could look at some other ones, but honestly, this is kind of like number one, top choice. This is what we want to do. And they were like, that's a great location, because we focus on too, not only where the most, issues we face with graffiti and dumping and that type of stuff, but also what has the most traffic and visibility and, entering the neighborhood and welcoming folks. So we weigh all of that in location selection. So we said, how about this location? They said, yes. We, of course, mentioned select the artist, and we actually met with the community group before even we had selected an artist. The sponsor and I did, and we got some feedback from the community group to kind of just see where their mind was even at, because I think that was helpful for us to kind of just say, okay, they want something more history based. They have great pride in their history in that neighborhood. So they want to do more history based rather than, more futuristic or more, I don't know, animated. They want it to really be very anchored in their history. And so then we get with, in this case, Juan here. Juan had done a piece. I don't want to share too much, Juan, because I don't want to give away too many of your what's going to be in that mural, but Juan had done something previously that the community really liked, and that we thought that would be a good fit here, just a different spin on it. And so we mentioned that to Juan, and then started sending a bunch of different historical aspects of the neighborhood that we want to be included. And I think I sent them maybe like 6 or 7. Doesn't mean all 6 or 7 are going to be included in there, but it's just a start. It's like, I feel like it's always better to send the artist more than not enough. Just start sending them more things of inspiration. And then from there, I don't know, Juan, if you want to take it up in terms of, what happens, we're going with you as the artist. We have a location. The property owner has said, yes, I'm open to a mural. I just want to see a rendering. And we say, yes, we're covering the cost of all that. So that's all good. We send you inspiration. What do you do next?
Yeah, so what I do is I take the inspiration, I have a mood board basically, and then I also just start breaking down the artist elements of what I want to create on this thing. So I want to, is it composition? Do I want negative space, or do I want the negative space? So I start image building. And obviously my first question as an artist is like, who needs to approve this? So it's good to identify as an artist, like, who am I going to get a yes from for me to start painting on the wall? And hopefully it's just 1 or 2 people. Or if it's more than that, then if it's a whole community group, then as an artist, you have to keep in mind, then this process is going to be even longer. The cool thing about Beautify Riverside right now is that they're doing all the legwork on behalf of the artists, and then really plugging the artists when it comes time to execution and vision, which is really helpful. Just know that through my residency, everything Philip described, I had to do from scratch. Even from organizing meetings to like getting the community or participating in their meetings, and just like finding ways to plug into the community and to develop a mural advisory task force. But if all that legwork is done for you, cool. The organization already did it, cool. But if not, then just know that maybe some organizations may not even have that infrastructure just yet. That as an artist, you also gets added to your work. So obviously this grant with organization, there's a large fund. So that can be part of what you're charging for as well. The legwork it takes to have an informed piece. And then once the parties that were agreed upon approve, so this in this case would be the property owner and the person sponsoring the piece, then I can move forward, and then I'll spend another week purchasing supplies based on the approved design. Try not to buy supplies until your design's approved, and also let the organization know, hey, I can't start immediately. I need to buy according to design agreed upon. And then from there, and I know this seems like common sense, but sometimes, we're just so into it and we're like, oh, we just want to get it done. But like, just, pace it out, give some space to purchase the supplies. And if you need to rent a lift or scaffold, then make room for that as well. Schedule that in. Purchasing after the design's approved too, because if you do it before and expecting they're going to give you a yes, then that's poor practice, right? So just make sure you're organized when it comes to a timeline, and then give yourself some buffer as well. Most of the time when I create work, I always overestimate my ability. I'm like, it's going to be done in 2 weeks, and then sometimes it gets done like in 3 to 4 weeks. So as an organization, also be flexible. Sometimes when the actual labor starts, sometimes it does probably give it a week buffer, even from what they've told you. Just to know, like, and even as artists too, like if you're going to pitch a timeline, like over time, you'll have experience and you'll understand like what your true capacity is. And maybe it was like 2 weeks for one, but every design is different. And it is incredibly hard to predict. So sometimes a little bit more time is more useful than less time, and you're just stressing out and you're trying to cut corners, and it's harming your image. So I think just be, just logistical, think about it. But over time, after you do your first 1 or 2 projects, then you realize the scale of what you're pitching, you realize the effort it takes to do it. And then next time you'll give yourself a little bit more mercy. Because sometimes I do get up at 6 in the morning and I don't go home till sundown continuously for 7 days straight, just to fulfill the timeline that I pitched. But you can give yourself a little bit more grace as long as all these things are clear at the beginning.
Well, and while Juan is saying, that he's getting the supplies and the scaffold and all that, at that point, for the most part, I don't want to say my work is done, because it's not, but for the most part, what I expect from the artist, I need to know, when are you starting? When do you think you're going to be done? It's not like if you say it's going to take 10 days, but it's ended up taking you 14 days, that's not the end of the world. Or hopefully the planning makes it where that's not the end of the world. But while he's doing all that, and then in this case, usually I'm the point of contact. So if you have any issues, get a hold of me. So if the property owner is getting cold feet when you're halfway through the mural, or there's a parking issue, or there's whatever it may be, they get a hold of me. Usually I'm running around pulling my hair out because it's all the stressful stuff, but that's what the organization needs to be managing, because the artist needs to be doing what the artist is supposed to be doing, which is creating the art. So from there, the artist is doing their stuff, and then really it kind of, you get in your rhythm over the course of the 2 weeks, 3 weeks, however long the mural project takes to do. And then you come to completion. And then if you do, some kind of event at the end for a big celebration, that's great. But typically, once all the work that we really do is all on the front end of getting the agreement signed and getting all the timelines lined up and all the approvals, from there, once the paint starts going on the wall, for the most part, from a logistical standpoint, that's all smooth sailing on our end. The only issue is just when we have issues with people, or like I said, parking, or kind of those just day-to-day operational things, those will arise. But from the logistical side of things, most stuff is already done before the artist even starts painting.
Okay, and this question, I think you answered part of it, but just in case there was anything you left out, is there a public comment feedback period prior to the final mural being painted where the rendering is shared? And how would you recommend managing the process, respecting both the artist's time and vision and the local community members? But I think that you addressed that by the fact that you hold those listening sessions before you hire the artist, so that you know what artist is going to work for that area.
Yeah, so the way that we do it, at least, and I think, and then Juan has done it in a little bit different way. So Juan can share on how he's done it. But mainly through Beautify Riverside, is some of the things that I've mentioned over the course of our time together here, is that, for us, it was really important to make sure that we that things are happening, that we're moving. How do we get a dozen murals done in 10 months? It's because we didn't lollygag. That's a word that my mom would have used, but it's it's something that we had to move. We had to be respectful of community input, of course, but also we can't just sit around and just wait and wait and wait. And one of the things that I had told Rachel and Juan, it's somewhat of an unpopular opinion that I have, is that I think sometimes government agencies, out of fear or whatever it may be, thinks that we need to have 25 community meetings on one topic. I don't subscribe to that, and that's my personal opinion. It's not an official stance of the mayor or of the city of Riverside. It's just, I don't think that we need 25 meetings to decide if a mural is right for this wall. The community meetings, I think it's too much. I think if, in our case, we have a community advisory group that advises the mayor and city staff on the way things work, and they represent, like I said, all different portions of the city. They're not all from one neighborhood. They're not all one particular, gender, race, religion, whatever it may be. It's all different folks, and we get their feedback. And then in the instance of places like Casablanca, for example, or downtown, or neighborhoods that are really closely knit and that are largely residential, we've done specific community meetings for that. Now, in the instance of Magnolia Center, where we've done a lot of our murals, it's largely commercial. It's businesses. It's the Riverside Plaza. It's Sunnyside Drive, and I am become friends with most of those business owners now, and so I'll kind of just run things by them. I'll shoot them a text of a rendering and try to get their feedback. So in those instances, we may not have a full-on community meeting with businesses. We could, but we just haven't really done that quite yet. But I think 1 or 2 meetings is enough. And if folks are interested but can't make the meetings, we're more than happy to receive their feedback via email or phone call or whatnot. But typically we don't post, for example, the rendering on social media and ask for feedback, at least not through Beautify Riverside, we don't. It really becomes a very challenging process to do things like that.
And I want to add, working with an artist it's like working with any other service too, in terms of when I hire an AC guy to come install an AC unit, like the best that we're going to do to advise him is like, well, I want the vents at least in this room, in this room, in this room. Okay, I'll take care of it. But we're not having like a whole meeting around how he's going to do this connection or connect this here, the very specific, like usually that person is already the expert. So if you chose the right artist, you should be able to trust that their detail oriented opinions, or trust the artist on those choices, because they're the ones that are the experts in the creative making or the image making. so yeah, so there's a balance. Just make sure like it's like the organization has the big brush, while the I feel like the artist will really come down to the specifics, and I think the artist will be able to guide you to just successful images as well.
Okay, and then the next couple of questions are similar. They're to each other, not to the one that we are just talking about. So the process of establishing a contractor agreement, you did comment on that a little bit, and then maintaining it, and then having templates or forms that can help guide the process. So my comments on that would be, if you have a specific organization that you're working with, they may already have established contracts that you can look at and review. And I also posted a link to the city. Is that the final contract or is that just an agreement?
I went to go click on it and I didn't. Let me do that right now.
Oh, okay. But you can also, through this process, we are offering technical assistance. So if you have any questions about what could or what should be included, we're always here to help with that one. Do you have any comments?
Yeah, I do. In
Yeah.
terms of that part, I also saw a question about like maintaining murals and things like that. All that should be written in writing. So some of these cases, they're not called murals because some murals, like sometimes that word brings a lot of like historical value and preservation on them. So some organizations just call it public art. And so that way, and then they also put a 2-year agreement. So for some business owners, that's like, well, I don't want to like stay stuck with this art forever. And then it all comes down to who's willing to give their wall too, because that wall belongs to someone, right? So that owner, it comes down to the owner saying, I either want this permanent or I just want this for a temporary amount of time. So at least at minimum, I've seen contracts go for 2 years minimum. You can't touch this mural. The owner cannot buff it when you're signing that we're going to gift this, and it's like a one-time thing. And then over time, obviously it's documented, it's photographed, and over time, after those 2 years are up, the business owner can choose whether to remove it or not. And that just comes down to just respecting the property and the property owner. On the other hand, the property owner loves art. They want a historical piece. They want it to last forever. Then that maintenance plan will then, so everything's negotiable. I feel everything's very case by case, but these are all good questions to ask the organization. Are you looking for something long-standing? If so, this is the plan. And I think it has to come from the artist. I don't think sometimes we wait for the organization to tell us like, well, how far, but at the same time, it's something that keeps both of each other safe. So there's no like written rule of exactly, this is the contract that will be the perfect for every single project. I think it's just having a really clear line of communication and maybe even working on that together. Or even having a meeting and take notes on like what the expectations are, especially if everyone's new to this. I think putting those guidelines up front, and then that's it. So I think I've worked on projects that I know that aren't going to be there as low commitment, 2 years, or there's projects here that are going to be preserved for a long time. And that comes down to the organization and the property owner. And then the artists in terms of what they're willing to do, right? If you're going to call me back, then I'm going to charge you to touch up this amount per dollars per hour. Does that come from the organization? No, it comes from the artist. So the artist is good to educate yourself and be aware of these things and then write them down. And if they agree with it, then great. If they kind of said, no, never mind, then maybe you're not the artist that they're looking for, or maybe they don't want that large commitment. So maybe you can always ask, well, then what are you looking for? Instead of like giving up and say, oh my gosh, like I got rejected, just ask them then, what are some guidelines that you are looking for to have in this conversation? And then just go that way. Because all of this could be very new to our region. Again, like he said, LA and San Diego have been doing it for a long time. Over time, as things begin to grow and explode, there's going to be more and more competition. And then that's when rules happen more and more and more. But I think when it comes down to just be easygoing, trust each other, be lighthearted, be quick, don't make it too long, don't make it too complex. But if there are concerns or topics that you really want to include in these contracts, make it clear prior to even starting any work.
Okay, and then there was another question. So potential murals that have been identified by the city could be funneled through the organization to bring in the artist to do the project. So yes, this could be the case. If you are working with another business, the city would not necessarily be able to apply for the grant funding, only 501c3s. But artists can apply or organizations can apply in partnership with them. So that would definitely be possible. And another question was, where do most funding sources for murals come from?
For Beautify Riverside, at least, it's largely, crowdsourcing of funds. So the way that we started back in July of 22 was I, along with a few other longtime art advocates in town, that we all took our, and the mayor, of course, all took our contact lists. And we said, okay, we're going to do a mass mailing, a bulk mailing to all these people saying that we're launching this program. This is what it's going to be about. This is what we want to do. And here's various levels of sponsorship dollars that, $10,000 will get you this, $5,000 this, $1,000, all the way down to $25, because we wanted to make it as attainable as it could be. So if you give us $20, what is that $20 going to go towards? And so it's set. And this wasn't just, Beautify Riverside is not just about public art too. It's also about landscaping, planting, community cleanups, all different things. So there's something at every level that if you gave money to, you could, help, and you could see what it would go towards. And so we did that, and that's what kicked off our funding. About a month ago, we did our second mass mailing, if you will, and we said, okay, here's some of our favorite murals that we did, or the largest ones, the before and afters of these walls, of what it looked like before, what it looked like after. Help us keep this going, chip in some more money. And people were donating, and because you have people that love art and are interested. I mean, we were getting and then you have large corporations like Amazon was giving money. Banks were, Bank of America, Altura, Provident Bank, all that. And then you also just have individuals who want to chip in $50, $100, whatever it may be. So that's kind of how we at least have done it. The city of Riverside does have, through the Arts and Cultural Affairs Department, some money set aside for public art each year. That's not managed by our office, so that's managed by that particular department. So there is some, because some people do tell me, arts people like me and Juan, were like, you know what, the city shouldn't be relying on people to donate to make this happen. The city should have money for it. And the city does, but we wanted more art, and that wasn't already folded into the budget. So that's why we turned for Beautify Riverside to private donations. But so it's kind of a mixture of both city funds, which of course are taxpayer dollars, that all money that government operates on is taxpayer dollars. So some for that, but Beautify Riverside is all privately funded.
Okay, and then how do most muralists charge for their work? And also, are attorneys often used in negotiating processes for contracts?
Juan can take the first part, and I'll take the second part.
Okay. When it comes to attorneys, I have not yet used an attorney to help me write a thing. Because if you do that, then you're already giving, again, it's also about gaining trust of the organization. If you come in with your lawyers, then they're gonna be like, all right, who's this big shot? I'm about to get sued. I don't want to work with you. So it's just like that. It's like at the end of the day, I think the biggest tool to creating a successful project is just having being honest. You're not there to impress, you're there to learn kind of attitude. But at the same time, your work will also speak for itself too, like prior works as well. So I think just keeping it light, and as long as the relationship stays healthy and the communication stays very real, like, hey, I got sick this week, I need a little bit of mercy, like, let's just be kind people. And I think that's the best business model in terms of doing these community-based mural projects. When it comes to charging, also be human and be kind, like, don't undersell yourself to the point where you feel like, hey, this feels illegal that I'm working this hard for this. But at the same time, be mindful that organizations, their money doesn't go on trees, or they've already had preset budgets since last year. So also, like, be aware that even sometimes money is out of their control too. But if you both work on this and you bet on it together, there will be monies next year. And now we can include it, because now we can leverage whatever you've done with us this year to now bring more resources for next year. So sometimes you have to think forward thinking as well when you're betting on an organization or to work with a nonprofit. You don't just look at it for what you're being paid today, but looking for it, how these projects could expand and explode later on in your career as well. So when it comes down to pricing, that's on personal preference. I think it comes down to I know it sounds crazy to say, but you can just do a Google search and type in how much do muralists charge, and there's two ways. There's per square footage. Some people do it project based, and then some artists even have minimums. My minimums have grown over time because my demand has grown over time. So for me to weed out people that are wishy-washy, if my minimum was $100, and then normally when I'm doing $100 mural or a $300 mural, when I did, sometimes those were the people that were the most aggressive to being so strict on me and just so ungrateful and just so hard on me. But once you start getting into a professional, like paid projects, then usually it's because you've already gained the rapport and you have the experience. People are more respectful and more kind to you. So it just comes down to it. But there's different markets. Like, you know, we can either go to McDonald's, buy a cheeseburger, or you can go to a big cuisine like burger place that's going to charge you like $50 per burger. I think it just comes down to you and where you see yourself and how you produce your work. Is it fast, quick, fast food, or is it more time meticulous, very aesthetically pleasing, difficult process that also includes the photography and references of this, and you're basically doing this chef style work, you know? So it comes down to how you want to vend. And I think it's a free market in the US. So you're allowed to choose whatever you want to charge, but also just charge, don't go under minimum wage. That's for one, because it hurts the other artists. Secondly, if you just Google, I know just off the top of my head, I think beginner artists do $20, $10 to $20 per square foot. Then middle grade artists do 20 to 30, and then it goes from 30 to 50 plus. So that means there is no limit to how much you can make, but at the same time, not everyone's going to accept your full costs. And there's going to be times where even to this day, like you'll probably only get paid your full costs like once in a while. But in the same way, that's in every business. If you're a business owner, that's just what happens. So you're even installing, you're doing some gardening for someone. Well, they're going to say, well, the gardener next door is doing it for cheaper and they do a better job than you. It's like, dang, okay, so you lost. Move on to the next one. Or there's going to be times where like, you know what, I need this service right now, like tomorrow, and you're the only person that's in my phone book right now that knows how to do it. So what's your price? And then you say, oh, this is my price that I want to have. Well, now you're more valuable because they're out of time or they haven't done their footwork. You're the only artist they know, and you're very important. So it all comes down to the waves of the economy. And if you were just to compare it to a water bottle at the 99-cent store is 99 cents. That same water bottle at Disneyland is probably going to cost you $7 or $4. So it also comes down to the environment. Who are the organizations you're talking to? Are they Disneyland or are they the 99-cent store, right? So keep that in mind, who you're charging. Also be aware of who you're working with. And that's how you choose your clients as well. Do you want to be in a place where you're honored, respected, and you're cared for? Or do you want to be in a place where you're just scraping by, not really being respected? And then you're just like, well, then that's not my feature for any of you. But that's just, hopefully that helps you in pricing, but it's not up to me to help you like choose your number. I think choose the number that you can right now that's respectful to yourself and to others, and then you should be fine.
Okay, and then Philip, did you have anything to say on attorneys?
Yeah, and I'll be brief because I know I'm watching the time here, but I think that the question may have come up just because working with large organizations, cities, governments are notoriously litigious, or we love to get our lawyers involved in everything. We have a city attorney's office here. All cities have a city attorney's office. I hope no one hears from the city attorney's office because we don't get them involved. But typically we don't. Typically I'm kind of the broker of the contracts and all that. Now, we use the public art applications. That stays pretty much consistent. That has gone through the city attorney's office back when it was created. I believe it was 2019 that was created. But there are some property owners who like additional documentation beyond the public art application. For example, I worked on one mural where the property owner said that she wanted to have an addition to it that said, the mural will stay for 5 years, but after 5 years, the property owner has the ability to remove it, but at the property owner's expense. So the property owner signed that, and the artist signed that. So we do some additions, but that's I think at least kind of administrative enough where you don't need to include an attorney for something like that. But no, we don't include attorneys we haven't had to yet. So I'm hoping it kind of stays that way just for the sake of timeliness of the process.
Okay, so just a couple comments on, I mean, we're gonna wrap it up right now. Thank you to Philip and Juan for their insight. And thank you all for joining us and for your questions. If you guys need any help with filling out your application or just questions on the application, please feel free to email me. I also have office hours for the next 3 Fridays from 12 to 1:30, so you can sign up for those. The link is also in the chat. So if that is it and there are no more questions, I think we can call it a day. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Juan.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Have a good evening. And thank you to our interpreters as well.
Am I in charge of the one ending it, or do you have that power?
Oh,
Or
I have that power.
okay. So
I'll see you guys later. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thanks,
Thank
Rachel.
you.
Bye, Juan.
all right, bye. All right, thank you, Rachel. I'm gonna head out too.
All right, thank you. Oh, send me your W-9, please.
Okay.
I emailed you.
All right, sounds good. All right, bye.
Okay, bye.